Let them eat bread, and let the odds be ever in your favor.
And are there any objections to my citing these minutes as a true and accurate account of the last public reading?
I personally object to the criticism of the Trinity during Bible.
Then I shall duly sign. I should like now to call upon the author to introduce the invited guests to the house.
Tig, that's you.
What?
Give me a fucking minute. I wish this was not just all being like
this is my house. Or it runs by my way. So we'll just go through the standing orders for the debate. So speeches are 7 minutes. First and last minute are protected. Meaning that it cannot be a big deal why. There will be no advice from the audience given that this is a competition final. So please respect that. You're still able to engage in debate, so you know, woos and boos are allowed. But keep them minimal as these people are actually debating. So our chair tonight for the judging panel is Lee Smith. And alongside him is Claire, Peter, Afric, and Connor. So without further ado, I now call upon the chair to begin the debate.
The question before the House this evening is, this House of the Roman Senate would stab Caesar. And I should now like to call upon stab Caesar. And I should now like to call upon to propose a motion to this House, Katrina Mead Bray.
Okay, I was going to start with something about how, true to form for every round of this competition, we have to decide whether or not to kill a now long dead white man, but Tig got there first, so we'll skip that bit. I'm going to be talking to you about the context of this debate, which will lead me in nicely to the comparative that lies in front of us, and somewhere in there also going to point out what matters to the Roman Senate, because this is an actor debate, meaning that we are making this decision as the Roman Senate, so it doesn't matter what is best for absolutely anybody else. The only decision making that we have to weigh up in this debate is that of the Roman Senate. Good, I'm glad you agree. Within that then, the context that's taking place here. If people want to talk about the Roman Republic, they are welcome to do so, I guess, but they are wasting their breath and everybody's time, because this debate takes place after Caesar has declared himself a perpetual dictator and is, in effect, the Republic is dead. The Republic died, as it so happens, when Caesar decided to invade above the northern border into Italy, which was treason, by the way, because that was against Roman law. It was considered a huge I don't know, bad thing. And so that is very important, because what we have at the moment is a sprawling Rome that is trying to take on far too much, far too quickly. The way they've done that is by bringing about a series of kind of power distributions to the military, and this is causing huge chaos. What is going on at the time is a lot of infighting. Particular elements of the military are behind Caesar, are fine with this power grabbing because it is elevating their status in life, and a lot of ordinary people of Rome are suffering hugely because there is no economic kind of wealth going on, because all of the money is being spent on trying to amass more territory, but trying to amass it in a truly stupid and unstrategic way of doing it, because at the time devolved power has meant that they are expanding on all sides rather than having any sort of a consolidation of where exactly they're moving. So on the one hand, Caesar is trying to be a dictator, and on the other, he is just being a dick. In terms of why that's relevant for the comparative within this debate, it's very handy for Op, because they can get up and try and tell you that this is what might have happened. Like, on Prop, we do have the, you know, the slight inconvenience of, you know, history, which tells us what actually happens on our side. However, that does not, like, in any way mean that they get to just come up and say whatever they want as to what happens, because they also have to engage with, like, the relevant context and the relevant, like, decisions that people were making. So why you're not going to get a republic on their side, why you can't rein that back in. So firstly, there's the stuff that I just told you about why Caesar is having a sprawling military. The military has gone out of control. Caesar himself has gone way out of control. It's a bit like Tig sitting here trying to tell us that he's the auditor for tonight. Nobody is fooled. Nobody is thinking that that's what's going on. Everybody knows that Caesar is trying to take over, and this is not something like, it's not like you can give Caesar a bit of a rap on the knuckles and he's going to be a good boy. Like, there are only 5 accounts of what went on at this time. But of those 5 accounts, the thing that they are very agreed upon is that Caesar was a fucking egomaniac. He was not stopping for nobody's business. He was intent upon continuing to expand that power, and he wanted to, like genuinely wanted to be ruler of the world. That was his aim. Like, he was aiming for that sky, and he wasn't being stopped by any inconveniences such as what was going to happen to everybody else around him. The third thing then is that they have to contend with both those characterizations. So how the fuck they're going to make the military behave themselves on their side of the house, how the fuck they would make Caesar do anything other than continue to go for his like little merry band wagon of like being egomaniac of the world. And thirdly, they have to deal with the band of conspirators. So you end up with 60 people who stab Caesar. So you have, and these are 60 of the most powerful people in all of Rome at that time. They do range in where they come from members of the Senate, and then ultimately members of the like ordinary people. But the most important thing within that is that those people, when you think about them, like Brutus killed himself at the end of this. Lots of them were happy to die for this cause, because what mattered to them as Roman Senate, and that's incredibly important in this debate because we are them making that decision, we're not anybody else, so you guys have to provide some sort of realistic characterization of why they would do something other than that, why that would be in their interests. These people were willing to die for their cause. They knew that this was going, like they had no expectation of this working out in their favour. Brutus was happy to, rather than flee in exile, these were people with lots of money, they could have done things like that if they had wanted to, but they believed very firmly in that cause. They were fine to die for that cause, so they have to provide some sort of a realistic mechanism for why, given that they had lots of options, these are people who could have fled, they could have gone into exile, they could have sat back and taken kickbacks from Caesar's happy regime. They decided not to do that. Like, that is the ultimate dedication to your cause, so they're going to have to contend with that. Go.
You talked about infighting. Do you think that infighting will be increased or decreased after the assassination of a major leader?
Thanks for that. Forgot about that bit. So what we end up with after Caesar is Augustus. And Augustus is like the definition, and like these words are never going to come out of my mouth again, so here you go, of a benevolent dictator. And actually, under Augustus, what we had in Rome, and this is the part where being on the side of history actually is a little bit helpful, because that was the single period of Rome, with a generation, or no, not even a century or two.
And little do we know it, that the world will know for a great deal of time. But what does that mean? Because Katrina talks about how the senators have various concerns, but she doesn't really list them. I think that there are probably 3 things that the senators are united, no matter who the individual senators are, by caring about. First of all, Rome, the continued existence and prosperity of the Roman state. Second of all, the continued existence, prosperity, and power of the Roman Senate itself. Presumably, if they are members of the Senate, they think the Senate should continue to exist and continue to have a relatively large say in society. I think they also probably care about their own survival, but Katrina's contested that. We'll come back to that in a sec. And third of all, they probably care about destroying Carthage, but I couldn't find a way to really work that into my speech. Two things I want to talk about therefore. First of all, the Republic itself and how by killing Caesar we will surely cement the slide into dictatorship. And second of all, about Caesar himself and how killing Caesar not only deprives us of what Caesar can give to the Republic, Empire, whatever you want to call it, at this turning point, but also what the implications are about that into the future. All my rebuttal will be interwoven. Katrina is right when she says that this comes at a period of upheaval. She's right when she says that the Republic is dead. That's actually, funny enough, what I have written at the top of this piece of paper. It says the Republic is dead, so I'm glad Katrina agrees on that one. The person whose name Katrina can't remember who came before Julius Caesar was Pompey. And the reason Pompey is important is because he was a dictator before Julius Caesar was. Julius Caesar was not the first person to be given massive powers overarching those of the Senate. The idea that killing Caesar is going to somehow be a bulwark against the slide of Rome into dictatorship is dependent on the idea that Caesar is somehow uniquely to blame for the slide of Rome into dictatorship. The slide of Rome into dictatorship has been happening for a very long time. Pompey was just one of the people who's most successful at it. Caesar was even more successful again. It is our contention that this slide into dictatorship would have happened no matter who the military leader of the day happened to be. Important things about Caesar that we have to note. First of all, Caesar is incredibly popular with the landless classes in Rome. One of the things that Caesar did, apart from consolidating his own power, was he massively dismantled the power of the aristocracy within Rome. He opened up Senate offices to people who weren't landed gentry. He increased bread rations, that kind of thing. He was very, very, very popular with the normal people in Rome. Second of all, Caesar is also very popular with numerous political and military leaders. Obviously, there are lots of people in the Senate here who don't like Caesar, but popular figures within the military, as a result of Caesar having worked with them, and it defined many of their careers. He's incredibly popular with those people. Military and political success can't be divided within the context of Rome. More on that later, but these people who are powerful within the military are also massively powerful within the political sphere of Rome. Third of all, actually that was my third point, how political and military successes are intrinsically linked. We'll come back to that later. What therefore does it mean when we kill Caesar? It means three things. First of all, Caesar's supporters are likely to strike back. If Caesar is friends with lots of very powerful people within the Roman military and Rome itself, they're going to strike back. Katrina says that us senators don't care about our own lives because we killed ourselves after we killed Caesar. First of all, I'm not sure how you can be like, because in real life the prop won the debate, the prop wins the debate. I'm not sure that makes a whole lot of sense. But second of all, note that a lot of senators actually fled to Athens after they killed Caesar. Clearly some of them do give a shit about their own existences. But not only that, they're not just going to attack the individual senators, they're going to attack the institution of the Senate. They're going to kill individual senators, but they're going to continue what Caesar did, that is dismantling the power that the Senate has over political decisions within Rome. Second of all, popular revolt against the influence of the Senate. The reason Caesar was so popular with the landless classes was because the Senate was mostly made up of the aristocracy, and Caesar came along and was like, I'm more powerful than the Senate, I'm giving you bread, I'm allowing you to take powerful positions. And he positioned himself as the savior of the common people and positioned the Senate as this unconnected aristocratic thing that didn't give a shit about anyone. When the Senate then kills Caesar, who gave these people all of their good stuff, they're probably going to revolt against the power of the Senate. They're going to try and get the Senate dismantled for years to come. They're going to possibly kill individual senators, whatever. Third of all, it provides even more justification for future dictators to be dictators. Most of the dictatorship was in response to political discord within Rome, right? There was disagreement over how best to run Rome. Is a republic the right way to go? Like every dictatorship, this dictatorship was like, there's been lots of strife, we need a strong leader to unite us. When you increase that strife by killing a leader and causing infighting on the streets of Rome, which by the way is already happening, you are going to cement that, and the next dictator who comes along, spoiler, it's Augustus, is going to have even more ability to do that. This is the most important thing because as senators, in this debate, because as senators, we probably give a shit about the existence of the Senate. If we didn't, we wouldn't participate in the Senate. Unlike what Katrina says, it is not our burden to prove that on our side of the house we can maintain the republic or we can stop the military being really powerful. We just have to say that they make it worse. We say that dictatorship probably happens on either side of the debate. Their dictatorship is worse. The power of the Senate is dismantled even further. I'll take Verena, whoever you've had a point.
Yes, I was just going to ask you, so basically your entire speech you've been giving all of the reasons why it is in the interests of the Senate to like overthrow Caesar. Could you explain why you think that the interests of the Senate and the interests of the rest of the plebs align in any way?
I don't think the interests of the Senate and the interests of the plebs align particularly. I think that but what I think happens is that when the Senate kills Caesar, the plebs, seeing that the Senate is acting against their interests, will rise up against the Senate and dismantle its power structure. That is my contention. Let's talk about Caesar himself. Rome's existence is intrinsically linked to its military successes. Rome's prosperity is based on resources stolen from lands it has conquered, slaves brought back from conquered kingdoms, tribute from pliant kingdoms that it has defeated in war, and safety from invading barbarians as a result of the Roman military being the most feared power on the face of the earth. Insofar as any one person can influence large amounts of things within Roman society, Caesar has massively influenced Rome's military success. He single-handedly brought most of Central Europe to its knees during his campaign through Gaul. What happens when we kill Caesar? Not only do we kill Caesar and lose his individual military ability to help Rome succeed, but we decrease the ability of Rome to attract future great generals. A lot of the reason great generals existed within Roman society is because they knew if they were great generals, they could have political success later on, because the two were very intrinsically linked because of this link between Rome and its conquering. If they know that if they get too powerful politically, they'll get stabbed by the next person who wants to be powerful themselves, they are less likely to dedicate themselves to the service of Rome. Rome is ultimately made much, much weaker as a result of this. The Senate gets dismantled. We are so, so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Is that called KV Tamil, the proposition?
Brief points of rebuttal at the start. So just to remove Augustus from this debate, there was actually a prior instance where the Roman Senate assassinated the Gracchi brothers because they posed a threat to the Roman Senate and land reforms. They're not necessarily going to be thinking about the fact that there's a dictator in the future, because in the past all previous examples of removal of people who were dictators or who went too far in challenging the Senate were essentially got rid of with practically no consequences. Some slight instability, but that instability already existed in Rome at the time, as the opposition has already mentioned, and I think that's a result of the actions of Caesar in his crushing of the Senate's armies, his invasions and slaughtering of fellow Roman territories and killing his own Roman citizens. So I think, that's sort of blah blah. Also, Caesar having the support of the people, Caesar had held a series of triumphs around the time he was assassinated. Triumphs were a thing where Roman generals enter the city and they're celebrated for, winning a war. He had won a war against his own fellow citizens, yet again slaughtering his own citizens, which had alienated the populace and removed the support of the people. This is shown by the fact that the Roman crowds greeted him with silence upon entering the whatever city. So I'm going to try to be serious for once. It's very difficult for me. So, essentially, a senatorial position was meant to be sort of a lifetime appointment / elected position. And I would say that because Caesar was named dictator for life, this created a unique conflict of interest between the ambitions of the senators, who intended to rise up the political ladder within the Senate throughout their entire lives, and the interests of Caesar, who was accumulating all the power of Rome in the position of dictator for life, which is simply true by the fact that he held all 25 Foraefices, which gave him complete executive power in Rome and power over all appointments, which essentially his power of patronage inadvertently alienated the vast majority of Rome, because it diminished the power of appointments to the Roman Senate, because he was essentially appointing people to empty positions where he held all the power, he had all the strength, and it essentially made these senators who were pursuing political power for their entire lives fucking pointless. Like, what is the point of getting up in the morning if a man like Julius Caesar holds all of the power of all of the positions that you want? It's irrelevant. You may as well just jump off a bridge. Blah blah blah. Okay, so throughout his career, Caesar had exhibited a pattern of behaviour which was clearly a threat to the Senate and the cultural practices of Rome. This is shown by the fact that he was... the Roman Senate was essentially formed by destroying the previous kingship, and Rome had a cultural hatred of the king. Caesar held all the powers of a king by combining the two positions of consul. Sophie, that is true. He was a king in... he was a king in all respects except name, but he adopted the garb of a king. He wore the red cowboy boots of a king, which was actually a thing back then, the purple robes, and by God that man was going somewhere. You know, he put himself beside the divinity, besides kings. He was clearly trying to be a king, and the Roman Senate's like, here, I want power, I want to pursue power, I'm a political actor, and this man is directly threatening the cultural practices of Rome and the Senate. So it makes sense that if he's violating cultural norms in that regard, in the kingship regard, which was culturally very important to ancient Rome because they fucking hated kings, then, you know, it makes sense for the Roman Senate to assassinate him, given the long history of assassinating anyone who tried to reach that position of power. Okay, so
Do you think that it will be easier or harder to gain power as a senator if there is a massive amount of political instability and public distrust in the Roman Senate?
I don't think the hardship is what matters. I think what matters there is the fact that it doesn't matter whether or not you achieve political office, because Caesar has essentially eroded all the power of the office. Yeah, they can still achieve power on that office, but if Caesar has taken that away, it's completely irrelevant to do it anyway. That was the point. But I think that was the point anyway. Blah, 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 blah. Conflict of ambition. So yeah, what I'm trying to say is that also Caesar had actually violated all of the Roman Senate had named him an enemy of the goddamn state before he went, slaughtered half of their armies, killed Pompey, alienated half of them, annoyed his friends by acting like a fucking king, as we've established before. So essentially the man was a bollocks. I'm tired, lads, I'm sorry. Economics MCQ tomorrow, just so essentially Caesar, mental, doing all that shit. Forgotten my original point. What was it? Fuck it. So Caesar is essentially alienating the power of the Roman Senate. The Roman Senate has an incentive to remove him because Caesar is directly taking all the positions and the power that they would like to hold. Yep.
So no one is denying that Caesar represents a threat to the power of the Roman Senate, but what we're saying is that the power isn't all vested in Caesar, and if you kill Caesar, that power doesn't go away. That power probably gets a little pissed if you killed Caesar.
That power is then distributed to the people that held it before Caesar was appointed dictator for life, because that's how the political system of Rome works. The people who previously would have liked to hold it. Also, Caesar's pattern of behaviour, when he was consul, he committed several illegal actions. He passed illegal legislation, he violated the norms of the Senate, crossing the Rubicon, was considered an enemy of the Senate. If he becomes dictator, then senators and the Senate can probably assume that he would violate more of these norms, and given the fact that he was adding multiple positions, again following the role of kings back in the scatter, it seems that he would be more likely to create greater instability in the Roman state and do more damage to the Senate in his personal pursuit of power, for which he was willing to kill anyone and anything to achieve. So it makes sense that you would assassinate him, because in utilitarian terms, he represents a massive detrimental effect to Rome as a whole. Despite whatever legislation, whatever the shit he passed, or whatever he did, he still killed thousands of Roman people. He still challenged the Senate. Yes, so.
Do you think that the Roman senators care about Rome as a whole, or do you think that they care about their own power, their own interests?
Why can't you care about both? I think that I'm a Roman senator. I think that I can maximise the ability of Rome through debate and all this other shit through like Caesar was at one point a senator. Why would he become king? Because he committed a few military triumphs when half of the other fuckers in the Senate had also done the same. Caesar was essentially a man who had great aspirations, shat on the rest of the Senate, wouldn't stand up when he came to give them some honours, and then alienated his friends, alienated the enemies he had forgiven, inverted commas. That doesn't mean they forgive them, to clarify, him. And was generally a pompous arswipe who, in the pursuit of political power, reminded me of myself. Honestly, if there's one thing that you take away from tonight, just remember that I believe that I am the modern reincarnation of Julius Caesar. If I held political power, you should assassinate me. No, seriously. You should assassinate me. I would kill yous all. I love yous, but fucking do it. Also, what time is it? How long have I been talking?
Over 7 minutes.
Right. So, that's basically the main point of this. Seek semper tyrannis, and I intend to be a tyrant. What was that?
Not gonna lie, lads, I'm a little tipsy, but let's get into it. What happens when a dictator, when a king, when any man with a monopoly of power over a state dies, or more specifically in the context of this debate, is killed? I don't think that this is something that the proposition have considered. I'm not sure that the proposition's case goes further than Caesar was mean, let's kill him. I'm going to talk about two things in this speech, about the two kind of types of senators that I think that we see, the two types of interest groups, and why the proposition's idea is uniquely bad for both of them. But first, we're going to have a little chat about the proposition bench. So, we have Katrina, and as Jack said, a lot of Katrina's case actually rests on the idea that in real life it went pretty well for them. But, oh, that's not the Katrina page, which we think is kind of beyond the scope of this debate anyway. And Katrina mentions infighting a little bit, and it is my contention that there will be so much more infighting on their side of the house. She doesn't really respond to my POI about this, but we're gonna kind of get into this a little bit. And then we have Queeveen. Queeveen says that if he gets killed, there's gonna be some slight instability. We think there's actually going to be a massive amount of instability. We think that that's probably what happens when people are killed. But I'm gonna get more into that. And then I got a bit tipsy at this point in the notes, so let's not. Okay, so we think that there are broadly two different interest groups in this debate. You have the politicians who are on the Senate to build and maintain their power, as many politicians are wont to do. As well as this, you have the senators who are there because they genuinely care about the Roman people. They genuinely want to make the Roman citizens who they have been mandated to represent better. I'm going to show you how both of these groups are failed by the government bench. Of course, there are people who kind of have a little bit of both, but I think I addressed that. So I'm going to begin with the more power-hungry politicians because I think that they're probably a bit more populist, as well as that I think they're more important motivation within this debate. So what do they want from a possible assassination specifically? I think it's perfectly reasonable to say that they at least want to build their power, if not the kind of take over Caesar's position. I think that's perfectly reasonable. They want to gain more influence, and this is impossible for two reasons. The first reason is that there are just too many people on the Roman Senate for this power to realistically go into the hands of all of them. And don't correct me if I'm wrong because I'm giving a speech, but I think that Queeveen said at some point that the power will be distributed evenly. And of course it won't be. That's not how power works. Julius Caesar was a powerful man, but not powerful enough for this to be evenly distributed throughout the entire Senate in any meaningful way. And even if it was, no senator in the Republic could be in any way confident that they would get any of this power, as it's just not how power works. It usually goes to one person, as Jack sort of touched upon in his speech. So the second reason is that what happens after a man with as much power as Julius Caesar is killed. A power vacuum is created, we think, within the Republic, within the Roman Republic. We think the very best case scenario here is that there is an insane amount of political instability in the Senate when they are when a new leader is being chosen. What specifically does this look like? What does it look like in the Senate? It's different factions being formed. We think it's an insane amount of fracturing within the Senate. Because of this, it's going to be really difficult to pass laws. And when you can't pass laws, you can't really trade. You can't feed your citizens. The modern example of this, I guess, would be what's happening in Venezuela. You have food shortages, you have difficulties in trade. The Roman Republic, the Roman people, in the past have had absolutely no problem with holding their government to account. And whether this happens through mob riots or political violence, this is bad for the Roman Senate. The impacts of this cannot be overstated. I will take a POI from anybody that we have not heard a speech from. Back half, basically. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to remember what it was. So on the stuff, okay, yeah. Do you not think that the Senate would take the chance of being able to increase their own power in the ensuing power struggle?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're talking about. Please sit down. Yeah, do I think they take the chance? Yeah, possibly. In fact, they did. But I think that would be a really bad shout. I think that would be a really bad chance to make. I think that it's in their odds that it's going to be bad. And I think that I've analysed that like perfectly well. So, secondly, I want to talk about those more kind of, I guess, altruistic senators who have, like, the Roman people, like, in their best interest. I've talked about the best case scenario of this power. No. I've talked about the best case scenario of this power vacuum. The worst, however, and in my opinion most likely, is a civil war in Rome. The people we are talking about are, like, they're rich, educated, like, white Roman men who are very familiar with ancient history. They have studied Alexander the Great. Needed to work that in. It's a tattoo of Alexander the Great. I'm a mess. And other similar figures. They are deeply intimate with what happens after you usurp a dictator from power. After a leader is killed. In Alexander's case, like this looked like a massive civil war. Like all of these wars between his successors, tearing his empire apart. The senators know how likely this is to happen, especially without choosing a definite successor. If that was in the props mech, then I missed it. Now, why is a civil war so bad? I think that's probably a little bit intuitive, but civil wars are bad because you get, again, it saps the food resources, people die, it is absolutely terrible for public opinion. So not only is this bad with respect to like the Roman people, which I think that some senators actually care about, but it is also bad for the senators who just want to rise in power. Because how can you rise in power when literally every person hates you, when there is no way that you will ever be elected into consul? What have I brought you today? I have brought you the interests of every possible senator. Either you want to gain power and you never will, or you want to help the Roman people and you have pushed them into civil war by killing a man that I would contest they quite like. Proud to oppose?
But I'd like to call this a bar proposition.
I was actually born on the 15th of March, which is, of course, the Ides of March, which is what I attribute my backstabbing personality to. I would like to thank Liam for picking a topic that I didn't know a lot about. So I was reading Adrian Goldsworthy's book, and he has this really interesting passage where he says, on the 15th of February, 44 BC, Rome celebrated the Lupercalia, an ancient festival whose main association was with fertility. As part of the rituals, the Lupercal priests, naked save for loincloths made of hide, ran through the streets, flicking passers-by with goatskin whips. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with a society with priests in sheets who are freaks in the streets. Kind of reminds me of the GMB. I have two main points. I kind of have two main points that I want to bring to you today, which is Caesar should be assassinated because Caesar's governance is beyond the realm of what is considered autocratic, even within the context of Roman democracy, and that a fair trial to remove him from office is not possible. So I just want to start with some rebuttal that was mentioned. We've basically turned this debate into something about whether a civil war is good, and I think when we look at this idea, it's the idea that that Op has basically mentioned, that Caesar's tyranny is better than having a civil war. And I'm going to prove to you why that isn't so. When you look at Caesar, Caesar didn't love the powerless in society. He only saw the popular assembly and the populace as a way to undermine the more aristocratic Senate. And there's an interesting quote as well. We've heard that Caesar is similar to previous rulers of Rome. But I was reading Cowell, who notes that Rome had known dictators, for there had been 83 of them before Julius Caesar, but it had never known a dictator for life, which is what he became early in 44 BC. When we look at how Caesar changed the face of Roman democracy. That is something that we need to consider closely. Caesar is changing the face of Roman governance, and why this is important is because he is normalizing tyranny and not just a determined period of time as a dictatorship. He uses the old Roman term of dictator when he really means tyrant. Another example of how Caesar uses old terms when doing new autocratic things is when he introduced into public life, as Queeveen talked about, the principle that one man might hold several offices simultaneously, when in 59 BC he was consul in Rome and proconsul in Spain. And we see this continuous erosion into continuous erosion of democracy into a monarch-like position. He also received in 48 BC, which is extremely important as to why the Senate in this debate matters, is the person who assassinates Caesar. He received in 48 BC the tribunican power, which means that he received the right of inviolability. This means that he could not be attacked, no thank you, he could not be attacked without capital punishment against the perpetrator. That means opposing Caesar means that you have to kill him or else he will come after you. And I'm showing you as well why even if you do attack him and you are given, there's no such thing as a fair trial if you do attack him. Because Caesar was given the right to appoint magistrates for the provinces and the right to recommend people for election for half of the magistrates' offices in Rome. This is in direct contradiction of the Roman constitution, which says the magistrate should be elected by the people. And Caesar is himself injecting himself into that process. So no fair trial of peaceful impeachment is possible. We see also in 48 BC that Caesar is given the right to declare war and peace, which is taking that right from the assemblies. So this idea that he's pro-populace is simply not true. He's taking lots of the rights away from what would be considered the less aristocratic assembly and giving them to himself. It's not just an anti-Senate tyrant. I think as well it's interesting to consider Caesar's classic hallmarks of dictatorship just in terms of, which I thought was amusing. Caesar was given, he gave himself the right to vote first in the Senate, and that means that it's basically eliminating the idea of democracy and the mentality of Roman senators, because they have to follow they see what he votes on and take his position after that, because they know that he holds the most powerful position, and the only person to basically suck up to is Caesar, because he's amalgamated so many offices into one. I think we've been presented this idea as well that Caesar, what was it that I think Jacques made in a POI? He said that what if Caesar, it was Sophie's POI, pardon me. It was there would be instability due to Caesar's assassination. Well, we already note that his desire for hereditary power would have meant that there would have been, we view his desire for hereditary power as worse than the instability after the assassination. Go ahead.
Okay, so do you think that a man who has a lot of power is worse than a civil war that slaughters half the population and turns public opinion against the Senate?
I think we fundamentally view a bad democracy as better than a good king. And we put forward this point as well, that Caesar has been a powerful and successful military commander, but what happens when you don't find the policies of the next tyrant into your favour? And Caesar viewed his power as hereditary because he intends to make his nephew Gaius Octavius the next tyrant. And also, he intends to make his son Caesarion, his son with Cleopatra, powerful. And that means that the axis of Roman power is now turning away from Rome and towards the east. We see that Caesar, in a way, wants to dissolve Roman identity itself. And this matters as a Roman senator because we want to preserve our own power and a Roman identity. Caesar wants to get rid of the distinction between Italy and the provinces, between Rome and the provinces, pardon me, and for the Senate to become a more representative body. We've heard that this is a pro from Jack, but we know that Caesar will just appoint his friends without regard to their origin. Not only is Caesar changing Rome, but he's doing so without the consent of the people. When we look at the reason why the hoi polloi, or if we're going to be very classist, the rabble like Caesar, is because he gave them money. He effectively bribes them, and he puts payouts from an empire in exchange for their silence.
we also see this, it's his approach with the military dictatorship as well. He offers a redistribution of land to ex-soldiers and is stopped by Cicero, a Roman senator, in order to preserve Roman democracy. Is that 6 minutes or 7 minutes? Okay. Well, for those reasons, I beg you to propose a motion.
I now would like to call Ronan Macula Runa. Close enough.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is a dictatorship of one man compared to a dictatorship of 10 men in an empire of 90 million people? Is it really worth risking the future of Rome for the sake of lining the pockets of a few wealthy senators? Is it really worth risking death and destruction of civil war for the sake of this small division of power? We in opposition believe that it is not. We believe so for two particular reasons. One, because Caesar's assassination is likely to lead to a civil war. But even if it is not, even if by some miracle the Senate do get some power, we believe that Caesar is in fact better than them. We believe it is in fact, even from the point of view of the Senate, I guess, we believe that it is not, as Melissa Barrett says, that they prefer, I don't know why I used her full name there, they would prefer a bad democracy over a good king, because in reality, like, the Senate itself isn't a democracy whatsoever. No, thank you. I'm actually going to deal with some of Katrina's stuff now. So let's do a bit of rebuttal. Okay, so firstly, I mean, Katrina kind of spends her whole first 6 minutes just being like, Caesar's a bit of a dick, and then kind of gives her characterization of what happened, the counterfactual, what actually happens when you kill Caesar. And she uses the benefit of hindsight here, which you're not really supposed to do, Katrina. I hate to break it to you. She says, oh, well, we know we get Augustus and that he's fine and benevolent. Okay, one, it's just incredibly unclear that you're going to get Augustus in the first place. It's going to be a bit of a power struggle. Two, how do you know he's going to be benevolent? And three, there were 13 years of civil war before they even got Augustus. We don't think it's worth that sort of death and destruction just to get him, if we even get him. No, thank you. She also says, and this is important, that the people who killed Caesar did so because they had some conviction to do so, not out of greed or power or anything like that, and they killed themselves afterwards. That's untrue. It's true in the case of Brutus, because his great-great-great-grandfather or something killed the last king of Rome or something. But for the rest of them, they were doing this as a power grab. The reason that they killed themselves was because they lost to Mark Antony and Octavius or Augustus in battle when they were trying to get power, and when they realized they were no longer getting it. So the idea that they would somehow go on and do that is frankly just untrue. Coming on then to Cleaving, where his whole speech, I'm going to credit him with kind of two things. His first reason is just essentially we should do this because we have no power, and it's not worthwhile waking up in the morning if we have no power. First off, there's more to life than just work, guys. Come on. Secondly, we don't really think that given there are 900 senators, you're going to get that much power that it's really worth fucking stabbing a guy in the back or the front or wherever. And three, as has already been pointed out, it just makes it incredibly difficult to gain power and plunges the whole place into civil war. And the second thing he says is that there's greater instability because Caesar is causing instability because of his illegal actions and stuff. Notice he's actually doing a lot to unify Rome and unify the people, the plebs of Rome, who have largely felt disenfranchised and shut out and not cared about. So he's expanded the idea of kind of citizenry to places outside of just the city. So now people from all stretches of Rome feel that they are Roman too. And he's also instituted a lot of public policies supported by the public. And even if, Melissa says, he's done this just because he wants to fuck over the really rich guys, we don't really care. He's still doing policies that are good for the public. And I'm going to explain why the Senate might care about that now. because I know that Katrina really wants me to POI me on that, but the reason that the Senate actually does care about the people of the Rome is because of a characterization that hasn't really been given properly in this debate so far, and that is that there are two main groups within the Senate currently, quite like the political parties of today. So we have the optimates, who are the really rich, wealthy guys who only care about themselves, and everyone knows they only care about themselves, and the policies they institute are just like for themselves. And we have the populares, who Caesar is the head of, and who care about the public. They're the people who represent the plebs. They're the people who push for policies that help the common people. And we think they're the people that realistically we should probably like focus most on. No, thank you. In this debate, they're the people who aren't just concerned with their own power. They're the people who really represent the true idea of a Senate that is supposed to govern the people of Rome. We care about we care about the kind of opinions of those people.
Ronan.
So why? No, thank you. So why then is the world better if we don't assassinate Caesar? Firstly, the Civil War stuff, okay? Some stuff on this. So firstly, the stuff about Caesar having supported the people that we've already heard. He instituted a lot of policies that were quite popular, such as his tax policies, which prevented people being extorted by the rich guys. Like, he'd eradicated a quarter of people's debt. No, thank you. And stuff about like expanding the Roman identity and stuff. He was also the head of the populares, and this is important. He was the head of the populares, those guys who were seen to be representing the people of Rome. If that party like turns around and stabs him in the back, like the people then a guy in the back who has instituted good policies for the people no longer trust that party that is supposed to be instituting good policies. They're likely to turn against them. No, thank you. Notice, secondly, that Caesar's mates can capitalise on his death as well, and use that as a power grab. And they can only uniquely do this when he dies, because when you die, rather than any sort of discussion around you being about your actual policies and your stuff, that kind of stuff, you just get this image of like what a great benevolent dictator he was that was cruelly stabbed in the back. They can use that, like Mark Antony, for example, can use that to gain support and use that as a power grab to just gain power himself at the expense of the Senate. Okay, so why then? And now the only way that you actually get power in Rome is through violence, okay? Because you have all these competing factions who want to get power. Like, there's no history of democracy really or anything like that. The last leader has just been killed, so the only way that you see you can get power is through violence. That's what plunges the country into civil war, if you can call it a country. But why is Caesar still better than the Senate? A few reasons. Firstly, because when you stab Caesar in the back, especially if this is the whole Senate, including the populares, doing this, then you give power to the optimates. You take away the power from the populares, who were seen to have stabbed their leader in the back, stabbed the guy who was instituting good policies for them, so they're more likely to support they're just not going to care about the Senate at all, and it lends more power to the optimates to do what they want, to institute just the tax policies that benefit them, etc. Yeah, okay, I guess, but notice crucially here that with Caesar still in power, he's still instituting good policies for the Roman people, even if his motives aren't particularly good for doing so. The fact he is still doing so is good for them, and the fact that the majority of senators are populares who care about the people, we think that we should not kill Caesar and ruin the chances of creating good policies for the good people of Rome. So for those reasons, I beg you to oppose.
Okay, I'm going to start with a little bit of rebuttal, but most of it will be interwoven. Okay, so from what we just heard, Ronan talks about the populares. He tells us that Caesar is the head of the populares. Okay, it doesn't really make sense to have this debate on the premise that you are one of the senators who is in Caesar's faction. Like, basically, if you are in Caesar's faction, you are probably not going to want to assassinate him. Like, obviously the debate is taking place in a world in which you are one of the other senators who is not part of his, group, not one of the ones who is just like one of his stooges in the Senate. So we're talking about the other senators, obviously. I didn't think that this is something that would need to be clarified. Okay, so 2 main points. The first one's going to be about, the tyrannical stuff we've heard a lot about, and I'm going to expand on how he is a threat to the economic interests of, economic interests of the senators, which we've heard a bit about, but not that much. Okay, so, we've heard he's destroyed the Republic. He is increasing his own authority, setting himself up as a king-like figure, weakening all of the institutions of the Republic, and crucially weakening the Senate. We've heard from Queeveen a bit about, there's coins bearing his image, statues next to King. He has a literal golden chair in the middle of the Senate that he sits in. He won't stand up to greet the senators. It's a throne. He's making himself into a king. He calls himself the father of the fatherland. So kings are immensely unpopular in Rome. Unpopular amongst go on.
Okay, given that there were a number of populares involved in the actual assassination of Caesar, presumably this does actually apply to all of them. So all my analysis does.
Okay, right. It doesn't completely fall out. Okay, you were talking about the faction he was head of. So basically, the stuff about the tyrant, about the tyrannical stuff, is what the populares care about, and the stuff about the economic interests does apply more to the other groups. But I think you can probably overstate how far the populares, other than Caesar, are willing to go in terms of appealing to the plebs. They do want to utilise them a bit. They don't want to completely undermine their own interests. We've heard of it. He's become dictator for 10 years. Melissa brings up the tribunician powers. The crucial thing about this is that he is allowed to veto the Senate on everything. They are completely powerless. They are completely impotent. So it is completely in their interests to overthrow him. Sophie talked a lot about, about how if we overthrow him, that their chance of having, of gaining power is very slim. I think this is exaggerated. The senators are powerful people. They're wealthy people. They have people on their side. They will have powerful backers. No, thank you. However, even if the chance is as slim as she would like to characterise it, a chance is better than no chance. She doesn't deal with the second half of the POI, which is how they are currently have completely no power. There is no way that they will ever get more power while Caesar is in power. No, thank you. So he's personally appointing magistrates. More than a king, he actually, we've heard about how he's making himself a king from the other speakers. More than that, he actually has supporters who worship him in a divine cult, and he has appointed Mark Antony as his priest. There is literal deification going on. The amount of power which he is personally amassing is obviously a huge threat to the senators. They don't have access to any of the instruments of Republic to challenge. He's filled the magistrates with his own people. He's starting to do that with the Senate. He's filled the Senate with a lot of his own people, so their literal jobs are at risk. They are going to be worried that they are going to be cast aside and just replaced by more of Caesar's stooges. No, thank you. The price if they don't overthrow Caesar is the total elimination of any vestige of power that they're clinging on to, and just fading into irrelevance as Caesar becomes a emperor or almost godlike figure that no one can challenge. So Caesar is a huge threat to the economic interests of the senators. So Jack tells us that because of Caesar's popularity amongst the masses, the Senate will be too afraid to overthrow him. I don't think this is true. I think that they are going to feel that they stand a better chance if they overthrow Caesar than in the current situation where Caesar is alive. And like the force of his personality, with the level of his popularity, he can strategically mobilize the masses whenever he wants against them. This is a more dangerous situation when you get rid of him. Like, they're not going to expect that the masses will overthrow the Senate. This would be completely unprecedented. They're not going to expect a complete revolution. It's a deeply stratified society where they're not going to think that they would have, like, they're going to think with their own wealth and power that they would be able to prevent a situation like this. So the senators are all patricians who are interested in maintaining their own status, wealth, and power. So Caesar's populist reforms are against their economic interests. He brings in land reforms. So during his consulship, he passed an agrarian bill to redistribute land to give the landless poor plots to farm. So, like, radical moves such as this are going to be seen as dangerous, even by the populares. Like, Caesar is going too far. He is removing the economic power of the wealthy too much, and the senators are not going to stand for this. So the senator does oppose this move, so he passes it through the plebeian council. So yeah, he's giving the power to the plebs. They are not going to, oh, okay, I was going to talk about he gives citizenship to the Gauls, who are seen as barbarian savages. He even lets them adhere into the Senate. They hate that too, obviously. They see them as barbarians. They see them as Roman enemies. Okay, ready to
I would like to call Austin Vince Coulter to close the case for the opposition.
Sorry for being late. As some of you may know, I am in fact currently running for Tribune of the Plebs. So I guess what it really comes down to, what the debate really comes down to, the kind of core of what we've all been discussing, is a question of unending civil strife, civil war, and the total destruction of the Roman Republic versus peace, prosperity, happiness, and a nice golden throne in the middle of the Senate, and a great guy called Julius Caesar. So I guess kind of the two overarching things, and really they're kind of part of the same point, is the question of structural stability, standing for the people, what the Republic means, and then more generally questions of the economy and questions of our own self-interest. So I mean, it's already been brought up, but I guess it really does need to be stressed again. Caesar does stand for the people. He is overwhelmingly popular. I mean, that is beyond question. And do we not believe vox populi, vox Dei? The voice of the people is the voice of God, or gods, as the case may be. Thanks. So the reality is, for our republic to continue to exist, and this is a republic that is made up of all of its citizens, not just the Senate, not just the patricians, not just the ruling class, but all of its people, it needs to ensure that it continues to have the legitimacy that comes from mass support. We will lose any possible support at the point that we kill Julius Caesar. He is the champion of the people. He regularly gives them huge quantities of money. He institutes lavish bread doughs that ensure that the starving plebeians of Rome don't literally starve to death. To go and kill him on the floor of the Senate House would send a clear message to all of the people who live in Rome that we give absolutely no shit about what it is that they want, about what it is that they believe in, and we only care about our self-interest, which will continue to undermine the republic that we are supposedly trying to defend and save by killing Caesar. We need to reform the republic, but the republic has already been reformed. The republic has been getting reformed for as long as the republic has existed. This is something that people on this side of the house, that the optimates, that the patricians, that the Ciceros of the world regularly forget about and just pretend didn't exist. But we've already had the social war, we've had the war with the Italian allies, we've had numerous wars that have seen the expansion of citizenship. First, full expansion of citizenship to plebeians, then expansion of citizenship to all of the people who live in the Italian peninsula. Why can we not continue to reform the Republic and to allow them to have not just a tribune of the plebs, but indeed a super tribune of the plebs in the form of a figure like Julius Caesar who is able to represent their interests and guarantee that no matter what happens, they will have a voice at the table. And like I said, this is just a question of reform, because to maintain the Republic, we need to be willing to continue to change it. We need to be willing to maintain the basic principles of having a Senate, of having a breakdown of powers, but to build in new things as necessary. Yeah, very quickly.
It is possible for a dictator to be treating their people like absolute shit and making them live in terrible conditions, and them still to be popular. Will you be the first member of the opposition to give a realistic counterfactual in this debate?
Okay, I mean, again, fine. Is Julius Caesar being brutal? Yeah. Am I a member of the Senate? Yeah. Do I particularly care if Julius Caesar is a bit of a dodgy dictator? No. In fact, I don't think any Romans care about whether or not their dictators are particularly brutal or not, given that one of the most popular figures in the last century of Roman history was Sulla, who used to nail lists of people's names to the door of the Senate house, and you could then go and personally murder them and take all their property. So I actually think not only do I not care, but no Roman would care about the issue of whether or not a dictator is a bit of a dick or not. They care about whether or not they're strong or whether or not they stand up for their interests. And moving on to our interests, to the question of the economy, which I think, I'm just going to hazard a guess, because I don't think any of you are classic students, that you actually probably, sorry, I actually don't know who you are, but yeah, the question of the current economic system of the Roman Republic, why it feeds into the debate, why any senator would want to lead to some kind of solution for the current situation. What is the current situation? Why have we not had peace and stability? Why have we had unending civil war for the last more or less century in Rome? Because we base our army on an idea of citizen soldiers. Every citizen is a soldier and every soldier is a citizen. That means that all citizens must serve. We've also now fallen into having an empire. We've gone from being Rome to Italy to Gaul, Greece and North Africa. That means we've had unending wars that has meant our citizens, the vast majority of our population, keeps getting press-ganged into going off and fighting these wars. Unfortunately, us, the senatorial class, and the patricians more generally, have had the slightly unpleasant habit of stealing their land while they're gone, and so we've ended up with a very large population of dispossessed citizens who are also armed and have, as such, de facto formed these marauding bands of soldiers loyal to individuals like Pompey, like Caesar, like all of the various generals that have attempted to overthrow the Roman Republic over the last century. Quick point, and the most important point, Julius Caesar is stopping this. He is ending this situation by restoring land to the plebeians, restoring land to the Roman population on the whole, and has indicated that he is willing to look into a professional army, a professional Roman army that will prevent this situation from rising any further, that will bring an end to civil strife, that will bring an end to having these marauding bands of soldiers who are just going to keep rising up because they have nothing to lose, because they have no land to lose. That is obviously in our interest as senators, because we don't want to die. It's in the interests of our class of people in general. It's in the interest of Romans in general. Yes, so moving on then, peace and stability, reform, and the economic question. Is Caesar someone who's going to come after our economic interests? No, he's not, because he hasn't. Because even though loads of us fought against him in the civil war that just happened, that seen him take power, he has forgiven any of us who have fought against him. He has not taken our lands, he has welcomed us back into Rome, and like I said, that's not something that most dictators do. I mean, dictator in the Roman sense. Sulla would have had all of us killed, Marius would have had all of us killed, almost all of these people would have just had us killed and our lands taken. Caesar has not done this. He is not a threat to the Senate, he's not a threat to our class. Because in many respects, he is our class. We can say he's a populares or someone's an optimates. In reality, he stands with the people, or at least the people think he stands with the people, but he is a member of the ruling class. And he will stand up for the interests of the ruling class so long as he is in power. That means he's going to stand up for our interests, for the Senate interest, so long as he is in power. And I'm going to finish on this. You know, there's this idea that he's undermining the Republic. The Republic of Cicero, this ideal republic that at some point supposedly existed in the distant past, either never existed at all, or is definitely long since dead, given the fact that literally hundreds of thousands of people have died in unending civil wars, in unending civil strife. And the only way that that's going to end is if we just bite the bullet, accept that Caesar is here to stay, and move on with our lives and let the Republic be as the Republic will be. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I will now put the question to the House.
So what's going to happen now is we're going to retire the judges to count committee so that they can adjudicate as so we'll just wait for that to read and then we'll go on with the
I will now put the question to the House. On this motion, this House, as the Roman Senate, would assassinate Caesar. All those in favour?
Say aye.
Say aye. All those against? Say
Nay.
The motion is to do this. According to me, I can now talk for 10 or 12 minutes, which makes up for me not getting picked for the grand final. And to do so, I'm going to do something I probably shouldn't do. As a non-debater, criticize actual debaters. Looking at you, Roland. I suppose the main thing is like, with the as a bar of few honourable exceptions, this is one of the most historically accurate debates I've ever And where's OBC? Nobody's here. You were sorry, I just love OBC. OBC, I mean, you probably hate Caesar, but like, at least you were saying things that happened. As I was even going on for that, I mean, there's stuff that was said. I think, I'm not going to pick a new Jack, but I think he said Pompey was dictator. Pompey wasn't dictator. He was consul 3 times, and he was part of the triumvirate. He was never a dictator. I'm just saying.
I read a third of a Wikipedia page.
Like there was no economic, wealth being spread. The Roman invasion of Gaul brought lots of slaves back, which were quite profitable economically. The Romans loved it. It was wonderful. We were Roman. And even he regrets. Funny, I guess. I mean. I was worried that there was probably too much hindsight. I mean, if you're going to assassinate Caesar, you kind of don't know if they're going to get pretty shit pretty quickly. I mean, you might guess they will, but you don't know how shit they're going to get. I mean, if your sister will, you think this is pretty great. Then you get your tongue and hands cut off, and they don't get that. So, like, you can overestimate how good that is. I think this. And this is, I thought yours was quite good. You mentioned Adrian Goldsworth, like always a plus. Rowan, yours was actually good. I was surprised by Rowan. Rowan was the great surprise of the night. Good. At least Google stuff, which was good. Totally, but overall, I suppose now I accept my own opinion, which is wonderful. Congrats with the captive audience. I mean, in my personal opinion, they shouldn't have assassinated him. Senate had been dead long before Caesar nailed it. And as for everything about dictators, a Roman dictator is not a 20th century dictator. People are usually a horrible person. I mean, Caesar, for all his flaws, was no Sulla, or any other Roman dictator. I mean, dictators go back to the early days, like Cincinnus in the 4th century, and Fabius the Mayor in the late 3rd. So, like, there's nothing unusual for a Roman dictator. Admittedly, he did give himself lifetime powers, but as it turned out, it actually was less than 6 months. Actually speaking, Caesar was actually quite a constitutional dictator. So, and that there's nothing to complain about. But even just looking beyond that, like, I mean, the people who murdered him were all people Caesar had personally showed clemency or clementia to. I mean, notably guys Longinus, Brutus, the same people who would stab him to death. And I suppose it comes down to these Should you use a standard or assassinate someone who spares your life? And I suppose go back to the Republic, I mean, it was the Brutus who killed his own son because he was a threat to the Republic, and it would be a Brutus who would kill someone who is the greatest threat to the Roman Republic. But saying that, the Republic had been dead many decades before. I mean, and even beyond that, destroying Caesar himself had brought stability. By conquering Gaul, he removed the final spectre to Roman domination. Romans like to say Hannibal at Portas, Hannibal at the gates, but it wasn't Hannibal who sacked Rome. It was the Gauls and their Brennus. That was the real boogeyman in the Roman imagination. And yes, he committed a few minor genocides while in Gaul. And while that sounds bad now to us, you know, it was surprisingly quite popular at the time, because this was someone eliminating the greatest threat, as we thought, to the Roman Republic, still existing, forming the Alps. And I was really, yeah, that's really it, really. Basically, Caesar, not bad. Maybe a decent guy, bar the minor genocides every so often. Probably shouldn't assassinate him. Things didn't go out well. And yeah, overall, good day. I should now like to call upon the auditor, Paul Tigray Malloy, to announce the Society's forthcoming events.
So two things. First of all of you should have an orator reserve. We ask that you fill them out as instruction on the inside. So we give a gold medal to the best speaker at the end of the year. So we really appreciate it if you fill it out and just hand it to me. Second thing is, our debate next week is this house believes that the West has failed to develop in the world. Do come on to that. Another helping discourse, maybe not here, maybe downstairs. Here's hoping, and maybe Paul will be here instead. We might have a guest next week, but you know, Paul being Paul has not told me. But other than that, we'll have a bit of a reception here. We'll have some more food out. We'll see if there's any more goodies. And other than that, I'd like to, and we'll be waiting for the judges to come out to announce the winner of this fabulous fall of days. Okay, without that, I'll ask you guys to go around and see the room and turn out more food. So I'll return the house to the chair to adjourn the meeting.
I call this house adjourned.
Don't worry. Also, like, if it takes anyone to it's all good, man. It's all good. Yeah, if you leave it there, yeah. I get it. Fuck that. I hate that shit. It's fine. I was also here at range. I was like, oh, we don't need for debate to yeah, she's bad couple of weeks. She's alright.
That's the end of the box.
She's being dude, even Boston so it's hard. I'll let you know when I'm back. Nice. Actually, look.
You guys did very well. I like it.
You did wonderfully as acting auditor.
No, I didn't. I fucked up.
Acting auditor is hard. Especially when it takes the fucking medal.